topics that I like the most about cosplay, and that is the part of character design. And so why did I choose this topic as a panel here? So I have the cosplay of the Barbarian from Diablo 3, and I made it more than 4 years ago. I made it from cardboard and paper clay, and the armor cost me around €40. But I still liked the costume, and I decided to compete in the Vienna cosplay competition at the Comic-Con. And I wanted to make some changes because I think I did not really hit the character of the costume. I think there was something very important missing of this artwork that I didn't have in my cosplay. So I started to analyze this cosplay, and I realized that the focus of the cosplay is within the chest area, and it makes this cosplay really wide and impressive. And the other thing that is very prominent in the concept art you see on the left are those lines, the lines that are pointing to her head, and these lines make her seem really mighty. You see this all the time when somebody is sitting on a throne, like the Iron Throne in Game of Thrones. They seem mighty because all the lines there are pointing to their face. But I didn't have it on my costume. So I did some really easy fixes. So I made a new shoulder part. The shoulder part I made was just 3 times bigger than the one before, and I took one of my weapons and put it on my back. So I have this scorn that is making like a halo of spikes around my head. It is different than the concept art, but it has the same purpose, and it feels the same when you look at it. Those were really simple changes and took me 2 days on a costume that I have worked on about 600 hours. So in the end, I actually won the competition with a cosplay made from cardboard and paper clay. And today I want to explain how you can understand character design, and by understanding character design, improve your cosplay. So as a theme for this talk, I decided that whatever it is that makes the design so special and so appealing to you, that will be what makes the cosplay stand out. So what I'm going to talk about is I will tell you a few things about different ways of character design, because character design is not the same for each medium. So when you're designing for comics or games or movies, it's different. I will then continue on telling you how you're using your body as a canvas when you're portraying a character. And under design rules, I'm going into actual designing, like where to put things, how to deal with composition on a costume, and such things that you usually just hear from art education. So, first I would like to introduce myself. I am Shizca cosplay from Austria, and I started cosplaying in 2012. I started with building armor, and now the last 2 years I also started sewing. And meanwhile I studied digital arts. So my art studies actually provided me with a design background that made me understand why some cosplays look good and why some cosplays just don't look good on me. So those are examples of my design work I'm doing professionally, or also designs that I'm doing for cosplay. Now, there are different kinds of character design. So when we're talking about character design, the possibilities we have in each medium, they shape how we design. So if we look at this character, it is very typical for animated movies or animated series, because animation has the possibility to use any shape for a person. And when you look at the character design we have in animation, we do not just have a character. We have a character and his environment, and the shapes in the environment, they just repeat over and over again, and the environment itself portrays the character. When you see Gru from Despicable Me in his office is just as mean as the character itself. Then we have character and costume design for theater. And the theater has the possibility to go very abstract. And we're used to it, we expect it. The theater is seen as a rather high art form, and we accept that it's not as concrete and it's more abstract. So when you have the Lion King and you have like 20 dancers basically cosplaying grass, you're fine with it. But it's something completely different that character design you would expect for cosplay. It's pretty similar with live-action movies, because in live-action movies you have a whole set that is creating an illusion, and it's going to make the character itself. Like Bilbo, when you see him in his home tells you so much about who he is and what is important to him. But knowing all this, we have one big problem with cosplay. You can't fit a movie set or a theater stage in your suitcase. So you're going to have to rely just on whatever you can carry. And this is why I like to compare character design for cosplay with character design for hero-based games. Because we have this thing that we are a living character portrait, but when we are at a convention, for example, we are torn out of the actual environment the character is meant to be in. I'm not within the jungle right now. So I think that hero-based games, when we look at games like Overwatch and Heroes of the Storm or Super Smash Bros., is quite similar in terms of character design than cosplay. Because you have a character that needs to work without its surroundings, it has to communicate with nothing but its body and its costume. And this is why I mostly rely in the following presentation on rules you would apply on game characters. So when we have our body as a canvas, what do I mean with this? So I put together this stereotype of a body scheme for character design. Because our body parts represent different things we do or think. So it is something that is very simple, but basically whatever is on your head can show how a character is thinking. When you have glasses on a character, you immediately think they're either reading a lot or thinking a lot. This is very often used as a stereotype. You know that a king with the crown on his head is thinking about his kingdom. And also when somebody wears glasses, you know they're seeing something different, especially when you have characters that have a very futuristic visor. You know they're going to see more than a usual human being. Meanwhile, the hands usually rather show what you have to do. When you have to shoot somebody, you might have guns in your hands, or you have a weapon in your hand, whatever game or character it might be. When you are cosplaying a librarian, you might have books with you in your hand. So when you are designing your own character, you can give him props that enhance their body and show what they're doing by holding them in your hands. Another part would be the feet. The feet show mostly how you move. So when we have now here the picture of Tracer from Overwatch, she's a very good example. She has these training shoes, and we know she's moving fast and sporty. But how fast somebody moves is mostly defined by their mass. Like, it's a basic physics rule that mass is slow. So Tracer wouldn't be looking fast and dynamic if she has a fat silhouette. And it did not mean her being heavy, but if she wore a coat like Anna does, this white coat that creates this huge silhouette, she wouldn't look as fast as she does. Because we see the silhouette of character, and if the silhouette is very wide and looks very heavy, although it's just like a flowy dress, it seems to be heavy, and we assume that it is moving slowly. And then there is this one special region that is the chest area. And usually there you find whatever defines a character. When we think about the very stereotypical character design of superheroes, they show their logos on their chest. And if you have something very important that the character gets during a movie, let's get back to Lord of the Rings or The Hobbit, they don't put the ring in a pocket. Most of the time during Lord of the Rings, they have it around their neck instead. Same with Aragorn's necklace. They keep the things that are important closer to their heart. It's a very symbolic place to put things, although many times it would be cleverer to put something in your shoe, but it is not very visually appealing and you won't see it. So I got another example from Overwatch, because Overwatch applies this scheme very often, and you can clearly see in most of the characters that this applies. So all the slowly moving tanks are very wide, they're very huge characters, and all the fast moving characters are wearing trainers or other lightly comfortable shoes. And characters that have a special vision very often use visors like Widowmaker and Soldier 76. Now, I already told you, the closer to the heart something is, the more important it might be to a character. So, the closer to the body, the closer to the personality is one rule that is very defining in character design and costume design. When I was researching for my master's thesis about costume design, I actually found this rule in many of the design books I was reading. And what is meant is that you are preparing yourself for something and you're putting on things others might not be able to see or you don't want them to see. But it is very honest what you choose, that you are only going to see yourself. So I would like to explain this a bit more on the example of Sigismund Dijkstra from Witcher 3. I was working on a gender-bent design of Dijkstra, who can be seen in the background, very faded, and the design I made in the foreground. And please shut your ears if you have not played Witcher 3, because I'm going to spoil you something. So close your eyes and shut your ears if you don't want to know. Dijkstra was the chef of the Redanian spies. Redania is a state which has an eagle on a red background as their sign. But he's working together with Temerian soldiers, who are actually his foes. And Temeria's color is blue. So I thought I'm very clever, and I'm going to make the inside of the blue sleeves red. But I'm not the only one who thought about that, and CD Projekt, the designers, already made the inside of his sleeves red. So his sleeves are actually portraying his real political interests. I was quite surprised that they were going this deep into symbolism in game costumes for a side character. So these are just some thoughts you can go through when you're about to design a character. And based on this, you can start choosing what he is going to wear. But just knowing which types of clothes and which parts of clothing a character is going to wear does not make them finished, because you still have to visually represent them and design them. And this is what I would like to talk about now. So after you have all these preparations, like thinking about who your character is and what defines him and whatever age he or she is, the job, the situation he or she is in, you might also have to think about the world around him. So even when we have characters like in Overwatch and Super Smash Bros. That have very different background stories, and they come from very different designs, like especially with Super Smash Bros., you can still see which kind of world they come from, because Ganondorf and Zelda are still wearing traditional clothes, they're wearing armor, while Kirby still doesn't wear anything at all. He is still a blob, and he is still from his own world. So, when we're talking about world building, I would like to show you a bit more on the design I did for Dijkstra. So, there is this special clasp at the collar, and this clasp is also visible and at the collar of the woman on the left. So, why are they the same? Because Dijkstra has been in a land called Cercania, and the woman you meet is going to be the one that is going to give you Cercanian armor. So she has some connection to the state as well. The same goes for the classic patterns that you can find on the jacket of Dijkstra. These patterns are called Moroccanian patterns. And the Witcher world is very much resembling Europe and Northern Africa. So when you have Moroccanian patterns, you can assume that this jacket was made in the southern part of the Witcher world. In addition to that, I also did research on real historical costumes, because when you're doing new designs, you want to base it on some real events, like Witcher is based on different fairy tales from Central Europe mostly. It also was created upon the visual of a medieval Europe. So when you dig very deeply into the Witcher universe, you can actually see that each of the costume parts that the character is wearing can be assigned to a special part of the Witcher world. So now I'm finally coming to talk about the design. So far we have just talked about actually thinking about the character and asking the right questions. But now we're actually going to draw something, and so we have some design rules. So the basic thing of design are shapes. So you can have like circular shapes, you can have angular shapes, rectangular, whatever. And if you're new to character design, it's always good to start out with just one basic shape. So I have artwork by Zach Fisher here, and it is based on World of Warcraft. And Alastasra has two basic shapes. One is this flaming gold shape on the top, and one is the rectangular gem. So in the original design, the gems are way less than in the design by Zach Fisher. So you have one dominant shape, and those are these flaming ornaments. And when you look closely, just over and over and over again, featured within the design. And I have another design by Zach Fisher here for the same character, and you see that the shapes that he's using are still the same. And I have another Overwatch example, because Overwatch is basically according to most of the character design rules anyway. And when you see the shape on the left, you can use it like a stamp and put it into the design of Moira's armor again and again and again. And this is an overall look on animation character design. And most designs just have this one shape they repeat over and over. And it's not just that those are shapes. Those shapes have certain stereotypes that are just linked to them, that we associate with each shape. So like I already said, that less mass, so small, and thin shapes are very often assumed to be fast or even unstable. And those are some examples that you can very often find in classic animation movies. Now we go deeper into the art education. And you know, composition from like the golden ratio, the spiral that goes within one picture or something like that, that's nothing that is just bound to pictures. You can actually use similar rules on cosplay. And here I would like to use Tuto. Tuto is a character design for the game Gigantic, and I really loved the game as long as it existed. And I think that the character designs are some of the best. Sadly, it was closed down. So, when you're drawing your character design, it's always a good idea to check if your colors still work in black and white. When you're drawing digitally, you can do this very easily by just adding a new adjustment layer, or otherwise you take a photo of your drawing and you make it black and white on your phone. So as long as it's still readable and you can still see everything that is important on the design, it's a good way to start. Now, when you're not seeing all the details of a design in black and white, one of the main problems could be that black or dark grays are on each other. So when you want to emphasize that something is a new thing, a new part of the cosplay, you could do this by having this light, dark, light order of layers. So when you look at this, you have the jacket of this character, and the jacket has a lighter golden rim. And the rim makes it easy to distinguish the jacket from the shirt below. Now, this is rather a trick that is used when you're doing digital design. You're reducing your design to 3 values. You can also do it on your phone when you're photographing your drawing, and it tells you if it's still readable if you reduce it more. This is not very important when somebody is standing close up to you and judging your cosplay or something, but it might be important if somebody is standing far away and wants to spot you already and already see what kind of character you are. So it makes the character much more easy to recognize. The human eye has the instinct, I would call it, to just look at the highest contrast. Whatever this point is, you look at it first. So when we look at this design, the highest contrast is actually at the face, and that is a good thing because usually you want people to look at the face of the character. So he has had very high contrast from the black outline of the eyes to the white mask. And the white mask is very distinguishable amongst the red scarf he's wearing around it. So you immediately look there. Additionally, the most saturation is also pulling the attention in. So, for example, when you're doing an armor cosplay, like I have here, and I paint a lot of contrast and a lot of flashy colors onto my boots, you're going to stare at my boots all the time. So on this cosplay I decided to use less contrast on the knees than I used on the champs, for example, because it makes it easier to stay focused on like my head and my face, or at least at the arm cuffs. And what is always a good addition is an accent color. So like this cosplay has a lot of blue, but the turquoise blue here is still an accent color because it has so much more saturation and it is just used in very small areas. So when you look at Tutu, the owl, he has these blue eyes, and those blue eyes are the only part that is blue on the whole design. So it stands out way more. And now we are at the guiding lines that you have heard in art education, and when you're talking about the golden spiral, the golden ratio spiral. And this is the same thing that I was talking about in the beginning when I made my barbarian and put the axe behind my head. So it is making a lot of lines that go to my face, or whatever is the most important thing on your cosplay. Usually, it might be your face. You can also make like different character designs that have very important things, like there are some mecha designs you might know that have an important valuable part on their chest, and many lines are pointing to their chest down. Then there is something called rhythm in design, and that's a very abstract term when it comes to visuals. So we're used to hearing rhythm for musical terms. Now, when we're talking about rhythm in design, we mean that it is not just 2 centimeters, 2 centimeters, 2 centimeters. Because it is like hearing boom, 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 boom over again. So it makes it quite interesting if a design has different proportions. So like you have a longer proportion of something and a smaller one. And for example, you can look at the bracer here, and there is a very long part that is brown, there is a very small part that is blue, and there is a mediocre part that is gray, and it has multiple sections on it. And for example, you have 3 lines, and the space here is wider than the 3 lines. So having different proportions over the costume makes it very visually interesting, because if everything was the same size, it would look very much like a robot or something manufactured. Like you have this, when you're just building something you bought from IKEA, it's going to look like that, because the Kallax is always going to look the same. And it's okay, but it might get boring over time. So there's also, these rules also can be applied when you're doing a new skin for a character, like you have in many games. So those are skins that were done for Tutu, and you can see that the important details are still there. So the mask is still the part with a lot of contrast, and the lines are still pointing upwards and all of this. So when you want to, like, for example, design a new skin for Tracer or any other character, you might want to analyze the character beforehand and keep the design details in the same place. So I was at a workshop of a Blizzard artist a few years ago, and he was showing some slides about the design of Overwatch, and he was actually showing exactly this, that they're doing this with all the skins in Overwatch. They're putting them over each other, and the regions that are the most important and have the most details, they're always at the same place of the body character, of the character's body. Yeah. And now, after all these steps, we actually come back to seeing all of this in black and white, or even just pure black and pure white. the silhouette of character is very important, especially when you're more into photography and want to do photo shootings with your cosplay. Having a clear silhouette helps also the photographer to create a picture that is easily understandable, that the viewer understands where are your limbs and where is your head. So, while the composition has now dealt with the structure of cosplay, we might come to the color. So, we have some established color meanings in our world. And like when we have here, that our heroes are very often blue and red and yellow. We are very used to this, while we have this cliche of the evil green. There are so many Disney movies where you have an evil character and they're going to be lit in this lime green. I mean, you have Scar and you have the scene in The Sleeping Beauty, and they even repeated it again in Merida. And it has become a trope. They're actually trying to break these tropes, but they're still very much burned in our brains at the moment. So Pixar also used this a lot when they were doing Inside Out. And you usually have brighter colors for happier characters, and you have more saturation for happier characters. And those are just basic rules that are very much stereotypical. But these rules actually go back to a different kind of root. So this diagram shows the primary colors of evil characters in superhero comics on the left, and the primary colors of the costumes of the superheroes in superhero comics. But the reason for this is not color meaning. The reason for this is that back then you could only print yellow, red and blue very well, and the other colors were mixed together. So they were trying to use the primary printing colors for the costumes. So when we're talking about stereotypical color design, we're also talking about some historical cliches that do not come from psychology. So you can very often just break with it. One example that has broken with the evil green, for example, is the Disney movie Moana, because the heart of Te Fiti is now one of the first objects that is lime green and still a good sign and not going to be evil. Now, the same as I opposed to do when you're designing your shapes for your costume is applies to color. So it's always a good way to start off with one main color and an accent color, and then you have one or two supporting colors. You can have many colors if they're very close together on the spectrum, or if they're very desaturated. But having a lot of saturated colors is not impossible or a bad thing, but it's more difficult to handle. So I really love Teresa, and I think it's technically a really good character design. So they even put her colors on the cosplay kit you can download. So you can clearly see she has the main color that is orange to yellow. She has the accents in blue, and the supporting colors are the grayish brown and the white. And it's pretty similar here. The accent color is the violet, and the main color is clearly red. This is a design that was made by Falcon Cosplay herself. I asked her if I can mention her in the presentation, and she's also clearly applying this color scheme. It's similar to the design of the tutu, the owl, and it has the main color in gold, and here red is the supporting color. Yes, and it's very similar here. And Witcher is not very obvious with these color schemes, but I think this costume could also be seen as this. Now, when we go a step further, we can talk about materials. So, the first thing I would like you to think about when you're designing a character is the world around him. I already said this earlier, and it comes very much into, and it becomes more meaning when you go into designing the materials. So you can limit your materials to a certain type of fabrication, for example, when you know the environment of the character. I would like to use the game ARMS here from Nintendo. And I have analyzed it and put out some things I noticed about the clothing in this game when it comes to materiality. So, for example, it does not have any stitches. All the clothes, they seem to be like welded together. You just cannot see single stitches from a sewing machine. And they do not have white clothes, and they also do not seem to have natural fibers in this world. You just see synthetic materials in the whole world of ARMS. And they also are using modern techniques, so they're not using screws. All the pieces on the characters seem to fit together perfectly. They're not screwed together, they're not taped together or whatever. You see a lot of glossy material, and the amount of materials that are non-reflective is very low. So what this creates is the illusion of a world that has very advanced techniques, that does not rely on natural fibers, and that develop their own technologies to produce things. And all of this is just communicated by the way their clothes are fabricated. So you should think about whether you want to show how you did the costume, like by showing stitches, or whether you do not want to show it because it is not the world you have imagined for the character. So that was one design I made for a contest, and that is pretty much applying all of what I found out in the analysis before. And I've already told a few things about the costumes in Witcher 3, and I can really recommend to study the costumes because each of them has a kind of story behind it. You can at least link it to a certain area in the map. And now I come to one of my absolute favorite parts. It is when you come to design the style for a costume. So what I mean by style is how does something look when you have already chosen what it is. And here are the C2E2 Championship of Cosplay winners from 2 years ago. And they're a very good example of how different costumes can be made. Like we have 3 armor costumes at the top 3, but they're very different. On the right you can see Okido, she's from Hungary, and won the competition. And her armor looks like real metal. But on the left side we see the complete opposite. Chinoso Costumes communicates all the materiality of her costumes by painting. So she has painted all the reflections of the metal. She has painted all the details of the armor. Many of these things are not actually sculpted. They're just painted like they are in the World of Warcraft game. So they do not shine when she is moving. They stay consistent. It's a completely different materiality, and the costume looks completely different than the costume of Okido. Also, both of them are wearing armor, and you know that both of these should be metal. They are representing metal, but they look completely different. So this is something I wanted to also consider in my cosplay, because I think it is supposed to look like stone. It's not supposed to look like real stone. It is supposed to look like stone in League of Legends. And it is painted, it does not have structure, it is very smooth. And to explain this a bit further, I'm going to compare barbarians. So on the left I have a barbarian from For Honor, in the middle I have a barbarian from Diablo 3, and on the right I have a barbarian from the Nords game. And here you can see on the left is a texture from a game like World of Warcraft, and on the right is photography. And you can see how different the wood that is used in games is from the real world. And this is not something that people are doing in the game studios because they're lazy or whatever. This is a very important decision for the look of the game, and it can also be used to make the look of your cosplay very distinctive. And here are 3 different types of metal. For example, on the left, the metal in League of Legends, the gold, is just yellow with brown shadows, but it doesn't have anything reflective on it. On the middle, I think it is For Honor, a concept art, but I'm not sure. And on the right, you can see real metal armor, and it looks completely different than the golden armor on the left. Now, another thing that you can consider when we're talking about style is the size of details. There are many costumes, very many character designs that do not have very small details. For example, my costume design for this, it did not have real fur. It more looked like brush strokes, because it has been brush strokes in the concept art, of course. So when we go closer here, we can see on the left we have very tiny details and real fur, while in the middle we have chunks of fur. So the detail size is different. And on the right side you can see that there are no small details at all. So the tiniest detail you can find on the very right barbarian is about 1 centimeter big, while the smallest detail you can find on the left picture is like 1 millimeter, it's 1 hair, but the thinnest detail on the right is a ring. Overall, it does not mean that the materiality that I just talked about has to be consistent within one game. And it can also be used to distinguish between different worlds. So for example, if you would put a character of a different world next to another one, like here, you can still see they are different. Yet, if you look closely on these 2 traces, you can see that the right tracer that comes from this fantasy universe has different kinds of detail. And the universe of the Atlantic skin, there is no damage to the costume, there are no flaws at all, while on the right, there are many scratches and parts that make it look used. So it's pretty much the same here. The very right barbarian is completely clean, and the left one is rather dirty. And you can also apply style further when it comes to logic. So Diablo is not a very logical game, for example. And while the left barbarian can pretty much fight, I mean the mask is hindering the sight, but it's okay. And the right barbarian at least can move very well. Yet, the barbarian from Diablo, I can tell you, you're going to be poked to death by your own armor. Because when I'm wearing this cosplay, I'm putting my arm up and I have these horns in my ear, and I have the other horn close to my eye, and it just doesn't work. So when you want to make a design that's not logical, that's completely fine, but please, if you do not want it, consider that you're going to move in a battle. And the same logic applies to the way these are designed. So it's basically an armor hard surface bikini and a bikini. And I think the Diablo Barbarian has missed a lot of opportunities of making the Barbarian even more badass by being movable and agile and not being locked into a bikini. But at the end, especially when you're designing for yourself, I want to give you a very important message here. So when you're designing for yourself, you can do whatever you want with your character design. If you want to ignore anything I just said, that is perfectly fine when you have fun on your character design. Or otherwise, if you want to do a sexy version of something, then do it. So I might have been sounding like bashing the Diablo 3 Barbarian design. And yes, I did not like the bikini decision, but I really love my cosplay. I'm very comfortable in it, and I would like to encourage you to keep going with your own ideas and don't let yourself be brought down by the opinions of others. They might say it's not logical or whatever. So I would like to encourage you to just design on your own and design whatever you like. So I guess that's it, because the last chapter is meant to be optional if I have time, and this is what I would like to close my presentation with. Just do whatever you have fun with and keep in mind what you would like to make. Like keeping in mind what your character is. So I would like to thank you very much for your attention. And I think we have like 2 more minutes or so if anybody has a question. Otherwise, you can later find me at my printing booth, where I am selling cosplay prints, for example. Or you can just come by and chat with me, or tell me whatever question you have, or get a business card so you can follow more design geekiness of me. So yeah, thank you very much.